Imagine being trapped at the bottom of the ocean, feeling the icy water slowly invade your metal refuge as the oxygen dwindles, and you know no one will arrive in time. In August 2,118 men lived this real nightmare inside the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk, and what happened in the depths of the Barents Sea would become one of the most harrowing tragedies ever recorded. It was supposed to be just another routine military exercise. The Kursk, considered virtually indestructible, was the pride of the Russian fleet, equipped with the most advanced technology and crewed by the country's best officers. On that sunny morning, while other ships watched from a distance, no one imagined they would witness the beginning of a catastrophe that would shock the entire world. At 11:28 a.m., a devastating explosion tore through the forward section of the submarine. The sound was so intense that seismic stations thousands of kilometers away detected the impact. But the worst was yet to come. Just 2 minutes later, a second explosion, even more catastrophic than the first, virtually destroyed the entire front section of the vessel. The force was equivalent to more than 2 tons of explosives, creating a massive hole in the hull and instantly killing 23 crew members. The Kursk began its fatal descent towards the bottom of the sea. Meanwhile, on the surface, the Russian command took precious hours to recognize that something had gone terribly wrong. In the submarine's rear compartments, 23 men had survived the initial impact. They took refuge in the 9th section, isolating themselves from the water that was rapidly flooding the other parts of the submarine. Using flashlights in near-total darkness, in freezing temperatures and with water up to their knees, these men knew they were trapped at a depth of 108 meters. Lieutenant Captain Dmitry Kolesnikov, one of the survivors, began writing notes explaining what had happened. In his last message, written with trembling hands, he recorded that everyone had taken refuge in the 9th section and that none of them could escape alone. He asked that his wife not suffer too much and ended the note saying it was getting too dark to write. Meanwhile, on the surface, Russian pride was preventing the acceptance of international aid. Countries like Norway and the United Kingdom immediately offered specialized rescue teams, but the Russian command refused for days, insisting they could handle it themselves. Obsolete rescue equipment failed repeatedly. Attempts to attach rescue capsules to the submarine failed one after another. With each passing hour, the oxygen below dwindled. The survivors used chemical candles that consumed what little oxygen remained and produced lethal carbon dioxide. They desperately tried to use carbon dioxide absorbers, but one reacted with seawater, causing a fire that consumed even more precious oxygen. Later analysis showed that the men survived for hours, possibly entire days, in a slow, suffocating agony. When British and Norwegian divers finally received permission to help and opened the submarine's hatches days later, they found a devastating scene. There were no survivors. The bodies of the 23 men were found in the 9th section, some embracing, others in fetal position, all with expressions that revealed the terror of their last conscious moments. Kolesnikov's notes were recovered from his pocket. The investigation revealed that a torpedo with unstable fuel had leaked and exploded, triggering the chain reaction. It also revealed that if international rescue had been accepted immediately, lives could have been saved. The Kursk remained at the bottom of the sea for over a year until it was recovered in a massive operation. When the hull was finally raised, it revealed the brutal extent of the destruction. The front section was completely obliterated. The victims' families were told that their loved ones had died instantly, but the truth about the survivors' prolonged suffering eventually came to light. The Kursk tragedy exposed systemic failures, obsolete equipment, national pride that cost lives, and the terrible reality that 118 men went down to the bottom of the sea in a war machine that became their tomb. Kolesnikov's last words, written in total darkness, knowing death was inevitable, remain a chilling testament to the horror those men faced. To this day, the Kursk disaster is remembered not only as a naval tragedy, but as one of the darkest and most harrowing episodes in modern history, where courageous men were abandoned in the depths, dying slowly while the world above debated politics and national pride. In the days following the recovery of the bodies, Russia was plunged into national mourning, but also into a wave of indignation that shook the very foundations of power. The families of the crew members, who had been kept in the dark during the crucial days of the disaster, demanded answers. In a tense meeting in the city of Vidyayevo, where many families lived, widows and mothers confronted military authorities in scenes that shocked the country. One woman who persistently questioned the officers was forcibly sedated by security agents, images that circulated around the world and exposed the brutality with which the government treated even the grieving families. Official investigations attempted to minimize the extent of the errors, but independent experts and investigative journalists revealed a chain of failures dating back years of negligence. The torpedoes aboard the Kursk used highly unstable fuel, a technology that other navies had abandoned decades earlier as being too dangerous. Leaked documents showed that there were reports warning of the risks, but that they were ignored due to a lack of resources to modernize the arsenal. The torpedo that exploded had been manufactured during the Soviet era and was stored in inadequate conditions. Metallurgical analyses of the recovered hull revealed even more disturbing details about the survivors' final moments. Tool marks found on the internal hatches showed that the men had desperately tried to force their way out, banging and scratching the metal with any available object. Some had written farewell messages on the walls using anything that could mark the steel. One sailor had scribbled the name of his newborn daughter, whom he would never know. Another left coordinates and technical instructions, still trying to help future rescues even knowing it would be too late for him. The carbon dioxide chemical absorbers that caught fire revealed another critical problem. These devices, known as regenerator cartridges, were extremely sensitive to seawater. When the icy water flooding the section touched one of the cartridges, it triggered a violent chemical reaction that produced intense heat and flames. The fire consumed precious oxygen and filled the compartment with toxic smoke. Toxicological analyses of the body showed elevated levels of carbon monoxide, indicating that some men died from smoke inhalation even before final asphyxiation. The temperature inside the compartment during the fire would have reached unbearable levels, burning the skin of men who had nowhere to escape. When forensic teams examined Kolesnikov's notes in more detail, they discovered that he had written two separate messages. The first, written shortly after the explosions, was technical and hopeful, explaining the situation and listing the survivors. The second note, written hours later, was noticeably different. The handwriting was shaky and irregular, the sentences shorter, reflecting the physical and mental deterioration caused by the lack of oxygen. Diving medicine experts estimated that the men spent between 18 and 24 hours conscious before oxygen levels dropped to the point of causing unconsciousness. This means they had almost an entire day to contemplate their impending death, to think about their families, to fight against the growing panic as each breath became more difficult. Some probably panicked. Others tried to remain calm, but everyone knew exactly what was happening. The psychological pressure must have been as torturous as the physical suffering. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who was on vacation when the disaster occurred, was harshly criticized for taking days to return and visit the site. When he finally met with the families, the meeting was tense and marked by accusations of incompetence and negligence. This tragedy became one of the first major tests of his leadership and exposed the weaknesses of the Russian military machine in the post-Soviet period. Decades of underfunding had left even the most advanced equipment in a precarious state. Nuclear submarines, symbols of Soviet power, were operating with obsolete systems and inadequate maintenance. In the years following the tragedy, more details emerged through independent investigations and testimonies from officers who broke their silence. It was revealed that during military exercises, there was enormous pressure on commanders to demonstrate operational capability even when equipment malfunctioned. The captain of the Kursk had reported concerns about some torpedoes, but was instructed to proceed with the exercises. Russian military culture, inherited from the Soviet era, prioritized the demonstration of force over safety, and questioning superior orders was seen as weakness or disloyalty. Rescue attempts also revealed deep-seated problems. The Russian rescue equipment, which should have been able to dock with the submarine and extract crew members, repeatedly failed because the docking systems were incompatible or damaged. In one particularly frustrating moment, a rescue capsule managed to reach the submarine but failed to create a proper seal due to debris and the angle at which the Kursk had landed on the seabed. Russian operators tried 5 consecutive times without success, each attempt consuming precious hours. Meanwhile, on the surface, Norwegian and British teams watched with far more advanced equipment, ready to help, but prevented from acting by the Russian refusal to accept assistance. When they finally received permission, it was too late. The Norwegian divers who opened the hatch described a scene that would haunt them forever. The icy water that rushed in when they opened the door revealed bodies floating in the darkness, preserved by the low temperature. Emergency breathing equipment was scattered throughout the compartment, some used until the end, others discarded when it became clear they would be useless. Photographs and letters from loved ones were clutched in the hands of some men, their last connections to the world they would never see again. One of the divers reported finding 2 men embracing, probably trying to comfort each other in their final moments. The recovery operation of the Kursk, carried out in 2001, was one of the most complex ever undertaken. Dutch companies specializing in maritime salvage were hired to lift the thousands of tons of steel from the ocean floor. Massive steel cables were passed under the hull and connected to a giant platform that slowly raised the submarine. The process took weeks and cost tens of millions of dollars. When the Kursk finally emerged from the dark waters of the Barents Sea, the sight was apocalyptic. The bow section was completely destroyed, twisted by the power of the explosions. Huge holes pierced the hull. It was a terrible miracle that anyone had survived the initial impact. Inside the recovered submarine, investigators found further evidence of the desperation of the final moments. Tools had been used to try to open valves that could release emergency compressed air. Technical manuals lay open to pages detailing deep water survival procedures. A logbook showed that the surviving officers had tried to maintain some order and discipline even as the situation became increasingly desperate, systematically recording survival attempts until the pen finally stopped writing. Families who visited the recovered submarine at a makeshift memorial described the experience as devastating. Touching the cold metal where their husbands, sons, and fathers had spent their final hours brought a brutal reality to the tragedy. Some families never overcame the trauma, especially knowing that their loved ones had suffered for so long when they could have been saved. Lawsuits dragged on for years, with families seeking compensation and, more importantly, the truth about what really happened. The legacy of the Kursk forced significant changes in the Russian Navy. Safety protocols were revised, rescue equipment was modernized, and international agreements were established to allow for rapid assistance in future submarine emergencies. But for the 118 families who lost their loved ones, no amount of reform could bring those men back or erase the knowledge of how they died. Monuments were erected, ceremonies held, but the pain remained. Today, the Kursk rests partially preserved as a memorial, a somber reminder that even the most powerful machines are vulnerable, and that national pride should never take precedence over human lives. The waters of the Barents Sea where the submarine sank have become a place of pilgrimage for relatives who throw flowers into the waves, knowing that down there, their loved ones spent their last hours in agony, waiting for a rescue that came too late, in one of the darkest and most tragic chapters of modern maritime history. The Kursk tragedy teaches us a painful and timeless lesson about the devastating consequences of pride, negligence, and placing political interests above human lives. 108 men descended into the depths that August morning, but 23 of them didn't need to die the way they did. They had time, help was available, but the price of national pride was paid with the last breath of these sailors in the icy darkness of the seabed. Their last messages, written with trembling hands as the oxygen faded, are eternal testaments to courage in the face of the inevitable and to love for those they left behind. Every time we look at the ocean, we must remember that beneath those calm waters may lie tragedies we never imagined, stories of suffering that defy our comprehension. The Kursk was not just a naval accident. It was a brutal reminder of our human fragility and the importance of valuing each life above any other consideration. If this story touched you, if you felt the anguish of those men trapped in the dark waiting for salvation, leave your comment below sharing your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss other stories that reveal the most dramatic and dark moments in human history. Share this video so that more people know about the sacrifice of these sailors and so that we never forget the lessons their deaths taught us. What aspect of this tragedy impacted you the most? Do you think tragedies like this could be avoided today? Leave your opinion in the comments and let's keep alive the memory of these 118 men who deserve to be remembered not only as numbers, but as fathers, sons, husbands, and heroes who served their country and paid the ultimate price. Until the next video, and remember that knowing history is honoring those who lived it.